My name's Evelyn Brooks, 42, wife of 15 years, mother of none. By his choice, not mine. My husband, Nathan, always said kids were too expensive. But apparently, an affair with his secretary wasn't. I wasn't always bitter. I used to be in love. The stupid, all-consuming kind that makes you ignore the red flags waving in your face. Nathan was charming, successful, the kind of man who could sell you your own shadow and make you thank him for the deal. I met him at a finance seminar in Austin when I was 26. He made me laugh so hard, I spilled coffee on his notes. He said it was fine. That was the moment he fell for me. Funny how that same coffee would come back to haunt me years later. For most of our marriage, I handled the home, the cooking, cleaning, emotional labor, all invisible work that doesn't show up on tax returns. Nathan handled the business, his business, our finances, our investments, our mortgage. He said, "You don't need to worry about numbers, Ev. I've got us covered." And I believed him because love makes you trust the wrong people. Last summer, he asked me to meet him at a cafe downtown, the Copper Bean. I remember the smell of roasted hazelnut and burnt ambition. He said it was something small for the mortgage refinancing. He pushed a few papers toward me, casual as if we were signing a pizza delivery receipt. "Just routine updates," he said. "Bank needs both our signatures for legal continuity." I signed them without reading. He kissed my forehead and bought me another latte. "You're my rock," he said. I smiled. If I'd known I was signing my life away, I might have asked for whiskey instead. 3 weeks later, I came home from grocery shopping and found the locks changed. A young couple was standing on the porch, confused, apologetic. "Sorry, ma'am. Are you the previous owner?" The realtor said, "You'd already moved out, previous owner." I called Nathan, straight to voicemail. Then his lawyer, busy signal. My heart was pounding so hard, I could barely hear my own voice when I said, "There must be a mistake." But there wasn't. The deed had been transferred to Nathan alone. The joint account was empty. My name was off everything. I spent that night in my car, parked 2 blocks away, watching the lights flicker through the curtains I'd picked out. My whole life reduced to a mortgage statement and a man's arrogance. The next morning, he called. His voice was soft, fake pity dripping from every word. "Ev, you'll be okay. I've set up a small account for you. There's something like 15,000 in it. Consider it a fresh start." I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was the only thing keeping me from screaming. "You stole my home, Nathan." "No, sweetheart. I just made it official." And that was the moment I stopped being the woman who trusted him. For a week, I stayed quiet. Everyone told me to let it go, to move on. "He's not worth the fight," they said. Maybe not, but the house was mine too. The savings were half mine. My life, that was entirely mine. What Nathan didn't know was that the same coffee shop where he tricked me into signing those papers had security cameras. And every camera caught the moment he slid the document over, the wrong document, while calling it a routine refinance. He wanted me gone quietly, but I was just getting started. The next morning, I walked back into the Copper Bean, the same cafe where my marriage had ended, with a signature and a smile. The barista, Jenna, recognized me. "Oh, hey, Mrs. Brooks. Haven't seen you in a while. Usual caramel latte?" Her voice was casual, innocent. She had no idea that the last time I stood at that counter, I'd been conned by the man who still called himself my husband. "Actually," I said, forcing a smile, "do you happen to have access to your security footage?" She blinked, confused. No, that's corporate. But the manager, Dave, he handles that stuff. Why? Did something happen? I leaned in slightly. Let's just say, I signed something here that I shouldn't have. 10 minutes later, Dave was standing beside me. Polite, but cautious. You'll have to file a formal request, ma'am. It's for customer privacy. I slid my old wedding ring across the counter like a badge of war. Dave, that man who sat across from me, forged a real estate transfer and used your cafe as cover. You want to be on the right side of this story. Trust me. He hesitated. You got a lawyer? Not yet, I said. But I have receipts. By that afternoon, I had a USB drive with 3 different camera angles of that day. Every smile, every signature, every deceitful second preserved in HD clarity. I spent the night in a cheap motel, watching the footage on repeat. The timestamp, the smirk, the deliberate way Nathan swapped the last page while I reached for my coffee. It wasn't just betrayal. It was performance. He'd rehearsed it. That's when I called the one person Nathan never saw coming. My cousin, Drew Whitman, ex-corporate attorney turned real estate investigator. The kind of man who could smell fraud before the ink dried. When he answered, I didn't even bother with pleasantries. I think I got conned into signing my own house away. There was a pause. Then, how long's it been since you found out? 4 days. Good. That means there's still time to burn him. Drew drove down from Houston that night. By morning, we were sitting in his car outside what used to be my home, Nathan's new kingdom. Let me guess, Drew said, sipping gas station coffee. Joint mortgage refinanced, title transferred under his name. Then you're conveniently declared a financial dependent? I blinked. How did you? Seen this 100 times. Divorce by paperwork. They leave you broke and make it look legal. But here's the twist. If he tricked you into signing under false pretenses, it's fraud. I stared at him. Fraud? Yep. That coffee shop footage? That's your gold mine over the next week. Drew built the case like a surgeon. Every transaction, every withdrawal, every late-night transfer Nathan made. He'd siphoned over $240,000 from our joint account in the past year, moving it to a hidden portfolio under a shell company called NB Holdings. Nathan Brooks Holdings. Subtle, right? But that wasn't the best part. Drew found something even better. A pre-sale agreement Nathan had signed 2 months before I left. He'd already listed our house for sale to a property investor. The contract stated that the original co-owner, me, had voluntarily relinquished all claims. Voluntarily. I didn't know whether to laugh or vomit. He's a genius, I muttered. Drew smirked. Nah, he's just arrogant. And arrogant people forget cameras exist. 3 days later, Drew filed the case with the county court. Fraud, forgery, and coercion. I didn't tell Nathan. Not yet. I wanted him to feel safe. I wanted him to keep believing he'd won. Meanwhile, I kept my head down. I got a temp job at a local HR firm. I smiled when people asked how I was doing. Just rebuilding, I'd say. But every night, I watched the footage again. That smirk, that casual betrayal across a cup of coffee. The last night I watched it, I whispered to the screen, "You'll regret underestimating me." And oh, he would. Publicly, legally, completely. Because in America, property may change hands fast. But when it's stolen, justice can change faster. He took my home. I was about to take his entire name. They called it the coffee cup case in the newsroom. The footage and the signature, frozen on the screen, like evidence in a bad movie. By the time Nathan realized the cops had a copy of Dave's USB, it was too late. Drew moved fast. He didn't just file a civil suit. He handed a tidy, airtight packet to Marissa Clark, an old colleague of his, who'd gone from big law to elder abuse prosecution work. Marissa read the recordings, the bank statements, the time-stamped footage, and didn't smile until she'd lined up every legal box. Forgery, financial exploitation, coercion, she said, underlining each word. We'll file both a criminal referral and a civil complaint. We'll ask for a temporary restraining order, an emergency freeze on NB Holdings, and an order restoring title to your house pending the outcome. You want this public? I thought for a second of hiding everything, of settling quietly, of avoiding the press. Then I pictured Nathan's smug face at the cafe when he thought he'd won, and I felt my answer in my bones. Public, I said. Let everyone see. 7 days later, the courthouse steps were a circus. Local news vans from WCTX and KPRD lined the curb. Reporters shoved microphones forward like pitchforks. I felt every stare as a kind of armor. Some looked curious, some looked ashamed. Nathan pushed through the throng with his lawyer, the same easy smile, now brittle. He'd thought silence would make this pass. He'd thought arrogance and theater were enough to bury the truth. Marissa opened the civil complaint in county court. Evelyn Brooks versus Nathan J. Brooks in NB Holdings, LLC. Listed counts. Forgery. North Carolina General Statutes. Section 14-119. Fraud in the inducement. Elder financial exploitation. Conversion. Quiet title. Exhibits. Café footage. The 47-minute audio file. Bank ledgers showing $240,312 in unauthorized transfers over 18 months. The fake deed. Dr. Patel's competency letter confirming capacity, and a sworn affidavit from Dave, the cafe manager, corroborating how the signature sequence had been swapped. Judge Ramirez set an emergency hearing within 48 hours. The motion, a temporary restraining order, TRO, preventing Nathan from selling, transferring, or encumbering any assets, plus an immediate reissuing of title records to block any pending pre-sale filings. It was a surgical move. Stop the bleed, then take the scalpel out. Nathan's lawyer argued it was a misunderstanding and marital financial restructuring. He accused me of being vindictive, of manufacturing evidence. Then Marissa played the recordings in open court. Nathan's comments about, "We'll have the deed filed next week. She won't know what hit her," were crystalline over the speakers. The murmurs in the courtroom turned to a low, stunned hum. Judge Ramirez didn't hesitate. He signed the TRO, froze NB Holdings accounts, and ordered a forensic accounting to trace every dollar. He also issued a temporary restoration of title, pending the outcome of the fraud investigation. For the first time in months, I tasted the clean air of my own property. But law is slow, and vindication felt fragile. Criminal referrals meant the DA's office could pursue charges, but prosecutions take time. In the meantime, Nathan's life began to collapse in real time. First came the clients. The investor Nathan had quietly lined up for the presale, a small syndicate in Raleigh, pulled their LOI the second their counsel saw the TRO. NB Holdings lost the $120,000 earnest deposit they'd been counting on. Then, Wells Fargo, already uneasy after Drew's fraud report, issued a freeze on the suspect account lines. That $240,312 didn't vanish. It sat visible on the bank ledger, flagged and tagged. Next came the company. Nathan had been running a small insurance office out of town, a client-facing business that lived and died on reputation. Within 48 hours of the news cycle, 2 of his major referral partners suspended contracts pending investigation. By week 2, his license was put under review by the State Insurance Commission. One of his employees, A nervous young man he'd hired the previous year walked into the office and handed his resignation letter, eyes down. "I can't be part of this," he said. "Not like this." The community reaction was slower but harsher. People I'd known as polite acquaintances now avoided his eye on the sidewalk. The Johnsons, who had once praised Harry at the barbecue, stood on my porch with casseroles and apologies. Someone posted the courtroom video on social media. By Sunday morning, the clip had 200,000 views. Comments ranged from anger to incredulity. How could he? Thank God she recorded it. The tide had turned, but the legal theater had an ugly undercurrent. Nathan didn't go quietly. He started screaming about conspiracy, about being framed, and he filed a countersuit alleging defamation and malicious prosecution. His attorney tried to paint Marissa and Drew as opportunists, and for a second, the case felt like it might descend into a long, financially crippling civil war, where the winner was the side with the fattest checkbook. That's when Marissa opened her trump card. She'd spent 3 nights with a paralegal combing through Nathan's digital life. Burner emails, an anonymous Google Drive where the NB Holdings bookkeeping lived, chats with a title company clerk in which he boasted of getting the old lady to sign the deed in a coffee shop. Classic. Those messages were time-stamped, preserved, and now attached as new exhibits. A title company clerk, subpoenaed, swore that the notary seal on Nathan's deed copy had been cut and pasted and that the physical filing had never been completed. The clerk testified that Nathan had attempted a backdoor transfer route weeks earlier and had been warned about missing witnesses. At the criminal level, the DA announced they were opening an investigation into elder financial exploitation and forgery. "These cases are a priority," the press release said. "We will pursue all legal remedies." Nathan's face, once smug, now slid into automatism. He began to cancel media interviews. He hired a PR firm that specialized in crisis containment. But the damage was already systemic. Loans recalled, clients fleeing, license suspended. Meanwhile, Drew and Marissa pushed a parallel civil strategy, a demand letter to Nathan for full restitution, $240,312 in stolen funds, plus punitive damages and attorney's fees, an immediate rescission of any contracts put in place under fraud. They also sought a receiver for NB Holdings to preserve assets, TTL, and then something else happened that changed the game entirely. The jury of the Court of Public Opinion stared Nathan down on a platform he had never expected. At the same time the TRO was entered, Marissa authorized a controlled release of selected documents to the press. Not the whole file, but enough to frame the criminal implications. The recording clip of Nathan saying, "Once she's in Florida for the girls' weekend, I'll have the deed notarized at the booth." The wording was cruel and precise. The clip went viral. Local talk shows replayed it. Nathan's sister, previously estranged, called the station and read a statement that she had always worried about his choices. Sponsors that had advertised on Nathan's local radio show pulled their spots. His life became a shrinking bubble. Yet, despite the fury, the case was not a finished equation. Nathan still had lawyers who were good at stonewalling. He still had gasps of sympathy from a few corners. The "he's a son trying to help" narrative. Some would say the system was messy, that the law could be slow and cruel, that money and influence blurred justice. That's true, but we'd bought time, and time, in this kind of fight, is a weapon. 2 months into the litigation, the DA filed misdemeanor charges for forging a notary's signature and 1 count of felony financial exploitation. The state moved quick on the most clear-cut elements. Marissa negotiated the civil suit in parallel, threatening a massive punitive award if Nathan didn't agree to make things right. When Nathan's counsel finally called to talk settlement, his voice was thin. "We can avoid a mess," he offered. "Return the money. Apologize. Maybe a small payment plan. No jail. Your client doesn't want to ruin her son. I thought of every petty, 'we're taking care of you' laugh. I thought of the nights I slept on the couch, convinced I'd been sold out by the person I trusted most. I thought of Era's last words, 'Don't let them take your dignity.' 'No,' I said into the phone, calm. 'He'll do the paperwork. Full restitution. Return the house deeds and deed of title to me, recorded at the courthouse. Public apology, recorded and broadcast on local TV. And he'll open his books to an independent forensic accountant. If he refuses, we take it all the way.'" There was silence long enough to hear the shuffling of papers at the other end. "You're asking a lot." "You stole a lifetime," I said. "Ask for whatever you like." By the end of the month, the terms were on the table. Full restitution of $240,312, recorded deed returned, NB Holdings dissolved, and the settlement to be filed publicly with a press release. Nathan agreed, not because he'd suddenly seen the error of his ways, but because the alternative was criminal prosecution and the risk of prison. The day the papers were recorded at county court, I sat at the desk of the clerk and watched the stamped documents that wiped clean months of scheming. The house returned to my name in black and white. The bank reversed the fraudulent transfers. The newspaper headline read, "Local veteran reclaims home. Son pays restitution." The photo showed me, tired but standing straight, holding the deed. People asked if I felt triumphant. Part of me did. Another part felt hollow, because victory in dollars couldn't repair nights of humiliation or the slow erosion of trust. But the part that mattered was steadier than both. I had my house, my money, and the truth on record. Nathan's life was shattered in ways he couldn't spin back together. And yet, even as the courtroom doors close and the press cameras move on to the next scandal, the work of living begins. There were neighbors to rebuild trust with, a VFW post to help, a fund to set up for other vets facing elder abuse. There were therapy sessions to attend and old rituals to reclaim. Retaking a house is a legal miracle. Learning to sleep without watching a shadow at the door is a different, longer fight. I walked home that evening with Drew at my side. He clapped me on the shoulder and said, "You did good, Evie." I looked at the house where Era's garden still bloomed stubbornly along the fence line, and I thought about how small acts, the recorder in my shirt, the USB tucked into Dave's drawer, the patient long game, had added up into something the world could see. "Not yet," I said. "He lost everything he tried to steal, but he's still out there." Drew nodded. "Then we make sure he has nowhere to hide." The truth had been vindicated in court. The money returned, the deeds restored. But justice had other appetites. Nathan had taken more than property. He tested the limits of human cruelty, and he'd learned the wrong lesson about who he'd picked to rob. People don't always pay for greed with jail time, but they pay with exposure, reputation, and the slow rebuilding of a life that can't be stolen twice. We'd won the first battle. When the gavel came down for the last time, the courtroom was silent. Nathan's lawyer mumbled something about closure and mutual understanding. But everyone in that room knew what had really happened. A man had tried to steal his own mother's life and lost everything instead. The final judgment was clear. Nathan was to pay full restitution, $240,312, wired back within 30 days. The deed was officially restored to my name. NB Holdings, LLC, dissolved under court supervision. And, the cherry on top, a court-ordered public apology to be aired on local television. The DA's office dropped the felony charges to misdemeanors under one condition. Nathan would cooperate with financial restitution for other victims in a new elder fraud initiative. Ironically, his name, the one he'd tried to polish with money, became the first one listed on the program's donor wall, right next to the words, Restitution Fund for Families Betrayed by Trust. When the cameras rolled, Nathan stood in a pressed suit, eyes hollow, voice mechanical. "I betrayed the person who gave me everything," he said, "and I paid the price. I hope others will learn from my mistake." The town did learn. Neighbors who once looked at me with pity now nodded with quiet respect. People dropped by with flowers, pie, or just "You showed him, Evie." And Drew, steady, loyal Drew, helped me set up a small outreach at the VFW, guiding seniors on how to protect their finances. We called it the Second Signature Project, because sometimes the difference between survival and ruin is just one forged line. But the truth, revenge doesn't fix the cracks. It just makes them visible. Some nights I still wake up hearing his voice saying, "It's just business." It echoes through the empty hallway, softer now, like a warning instead of a wound. One evening, I found an envelope in the mailbox. No name, just 2 words, scrawled in familiar handwriting. "I'm sorry." Inside was a check, the last $10,000 of restitution, and a photo of Nathan as a boy, holding a model house we built together when he was 7. On the back, he'd written, "You taught me how to build. I forgot how to be human." I didn't cry. I just stood on the porch, watching the sunset spill over the fence, the same way it had the night I almost lost everything. The wind rustled the trees, gentle, forgiving, final. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just sighs and lets you start over. As for me, I kept the house, the land, the name on the mailbox, because he tried to erase me. And instead, he wrote me into every headline. If you've ever trusted someone who broke you, don't let them define the ending, because sometimes the final chapter doesn't belong to them. It belongs to you.